Hitchcock's coming out of a world where everything was a proscenium and everything was structured, and he was able to take that structure and bend it and twist it and exaggerate it to a greater or lesser effect. By the time you get to Psycho, people are watching television. And Ed Gein is informing what's happening in the movies. We're starting to borrow from the real world.
Le roman était peut-être inspiré par un fait divers.
I believe so, yes, in Wisconsin
Oui,
somewhere.
dans le Wisconsin quelque part.
Psycho, in order to get the audience effects,
Je dirais que dans
the
Psycho,
audience.
pour avoir les effets sur l'audience,
I would say that this is pretty well as cinematic as a lot of pictures.
Oui, oui, en plus, oui, oui, oui.
It was a very interesting construction. I've tried for a long time to play the audience.
Aye.
Let's say we were playing them like an organ.
Why don't you call your boss and tell him you're taking the rest of the afternoon off?
The scene with John Gavin and Janet Leigh in the beginning.
What do I do with my free
The element there is the bra. Okay. But it's shot very simply, but ominously. There's something ominous about it. The scenes in the office are kind of all right, you know. But that Texan,
I'm buying this house for my baby's wedding present. $40,000 cash.
for his style, the blandness of the scenes and the blandness of the framing is just really a kind of a bridge to get you to the next major moment. I think his instinct is right in telling stories like that.
I never carry more than I can afford to lose.
How benign can we make these images that just connect the dots?
I don't even want it in the office over the weekend. Put it in the safe deposit box in the banking.
It cost only
ça n'a
$800,000.
coûté que $800 000.
And I used a complete
Et je me suis
television
servi
unit to do it.
d'une équipe de télévision complète pour le faire.
He was flirting with you. I guess he must have noticed my wedding ring.
It
Huh?
was
Il était
necessary
nécessaire
to make the
faire
robbery and what
du vol.
happened to the girl purposely on the long side to get an audience absorbed with
afin
her
d'absorber
flight.
l'audience.
Come in.
Where I slowed up was when I came to the scenes that indicated time and trouble.
Hitchcock really does love to surprise people and to take you in unusual directions. He sort of thrived on that, and he was very proud of that. That's what his cinema is kind of based on. The beginning of Psycho, it's one of the great misdirections.
He is playing with your expectations of where you're supposed to be in a movie, where you're supposed to be in a Hitchcock movie, where you're supposed to be in a Universal movie. You can argue the value of Janet Leigh's performance. You can say, well, that's a little flat, that's a little this, that's a little kabuki. Maybe all of those things are leading you to believe, as an audience member, there's a bigger cumulative effect. She's servicing an expectation.
The best scenes for me are ones he must have spent time on, the driving shots. You had to spend time on those, particularly the points of view somehow. And the framing of Janet Leigh in the center of the frame with top of the steering wheel and the bottom of the frame. Because you can make a choice. You can go above the steering wheel, you know, or you can go further out. But then maybe you won't see her eyes as well. So it's like the perfect size.
In quite a hurry.
Yes, I didn't intend to sleep so long. I almost had an accident last night.
The scene with the policeman.
Slept here all night.
Of course, the framing of him staring into the car. Yes, we know with the glasses he's scary. But there's something about the restraint of those frames. See, and the more you restrain, the better it is when the explosion happens. And on the way to the explosion, there are these meditative states. Driving.
Carolyn, get Mr. Cassidy for me. After all, Cassidy, I told you, all that cash.
And there's a sense of movement ahead, movement ahead. She steals money, then she decides to drive away, then she becomes guilty about it.
Gee, I'm sorry I didn't hear you in all this rain.
Then she meets this guy in a motel, and he's telling her all his problems.
A few years ago, Mother met this man, and he talked her into building this motel.
You're watching, you want to know what happens. She's going to bring that money back? Now, what is Anthony Perkins really going to do? You know, he has his mother there. Maybe there's going to be this whole thing going on with the mother and him and her. And
when he died, too, it was just too great a shock for her.
I mean, you're taken down a path. But what's great about it is that all your expectations are taken and turned upside down.
You know, there are certain rules, and he pulled a pin and rolled a grenade into the middle of that conference room and destroyed all those rules.
The camera's very much with Marion, right? Even to the point where you have that very famous shot of the shower head. All of a sudden you go from Marion, and the camera is then in this very strange place where you see both her showering and the shadowy figure behind that kind of visqueen curtain. He did it with an eye towards having to shift point of view 35 minutes into the film.
The very first screening of that film, none of us had a clue what was going to happen. And when that murder, that shower scene came, I've never seen an audience react like that. You could hear a sustained shriek from the audience downstairs. It wasn't like, ah, ah, ah. It was like, ah, like they wanted to close it out. But they couldn't stop watching it. You wanted to close your eyes, but you couldn't. Hitch was right. You didn't have to build suspense anymore. They were blithering idiots. The audience was, what happened? They couldn't believe what happened. They kept thinking it couldn't have happened. She's going to be alive. It was every impulse that you have for going to movies. It was the first time that going to the movies was dangerous.
7 days.
Ça durait 7 jours.
70 setups. I used a nude girl a lot, and I shot some of it in slow motion.
Ah ouais?
Because of covering the breast. You couldn't do it quick. You couldn't measure it correctly.
On ne pouvait pas le mesurer correctement.
That's when you feel like this guy really has his finger on the pulse, you know, of not only just audience response, but the world in general, that the world was ready for a film like that. It didn't know it was, but it was. This was a small story, but it represented probably something much larger on the horizon.
At that time, as it is now, we expect certain things. And it took storytelling at that time and says, no, I'm not going to give you that. I'm going to give you something else. Because you think everything is so cool. You're at the end of the 50s, the 60s are going to look glorious to us. I think it was really important for where we were then. You have Vietnam, you have World Revolution, you have everything that happened in the 60s, and the society has never been the same. That picture really touched upon that, I think, Psycho. Of course, you want everything so neat and wrapped up. Well, life isn't like that. Even the stories I'm going to tell you are not like that now.
My main
Ma
satisfaction
principale
is
satisfaction a été
that film did something to an audience. I really mean that. In many ways, I feel my satisfaction
que
with
ma
our
satisfaction
art
avec notre art
achieved something
a accompli quelque
of
chose
mass emotion.
d'une émotion de masse.
It wasn't a message. It wasn't some great performance. It wasn't a highly appreciated novel that served an
Ce n'était
audience.
pas un roman très apprécié qui a secoué l'audience.
It was pure film. People
En
will
ce
say
moment,
what a
les
terrible
gens diront,
thing to make.
c'est une chose terrible à
The
faire.
subject was
Le sujet était horrible.
horrible. People were
Les gens
small.
étaient
There were
petits.
no
Il n'y avait
characters
pas de
in it. I know
caractère.
all this.
Je sais tout ça.
But I know one thing.
Mais je sais une chose.
The use of film in
L'utilisation du film
constructing
en construisant
this story caused audiences all
mon film
over the
a
world
causé des audiences partout au monde
to react and become emotional. My only pride in the
That's why.
picture
Mais c'est
is
pourquoi ma fierté dans ce film,
picture belongs to filmmakers. It belongs to
Et que ce
us,
film
you and I.
nous appartient à nous et à vous et à moi.